make sure Tim's ready for the next one.
Central Hotel Panama in Casco Viejo, Panama. This is day 5 of Good Cop, Conference of the People. Bad Cop is happening a few kilometers away at the convention center.
2.2 kilometers.
2.2
Yes.
kilometers
Yep.
At the convention center, and that's the Conference of the Parties. Before I get started, I want to thank our sponsors, the National Taxpayers Union. I want to thank the Tholos Foundation for helping us defray some of the costs of being here in Panama. I also want to thank the TPA staff, Lindsay Stroud, who is our senior fellow on harm reduction, has put a lot of work into this conference, a lot of late nights putting the agenda together, and listen, a lot of years working on this issue and looking at the numbers and getting through the BS of what the other side says about what's going on. I want to thank Martin Cullip, who is our international fellow, who has also worked really hard on the agenda and making sure that this conference has gone on without a hitch. And really, it's been an amazing week. I've met a lot of wonderful people. Other TPA staff, Patrick Hedger, who is our executive director, is here in Panama. Michael Moore Ramirez and Lisbella Lopez, who have been helping make sure this goes on. But also the folks in Washington, D.C. We have Courtney Madison and Kara Zupkis, who are in the war room in Washington, D.C., making sure the live stream is going well. And thanks to our AV people for the live stream. But again, way too many people to thank.
Skip's been live tweeting it, actually.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. She has been live tweeting since the early hours of Monday morning,
Yes.
maybe even Sunday night.
Yes.
She started live tweeting, but she's an absolute rock star.
If you don't want to watch it, just look at her tweets.
Yeah, and it's been an incredible week. Now let's go over a bit of a recap of what we've seen not only yesterday but this week with Lindsay and Martin. And Martin, it's been a long week. I mean, there's been a lot that's going on, and before we get into what we see today and the future, what have you seen? And I know there's some things that came out yesterday that piqued your interest. So what happened yesterday?
What you mean at the conference? I
Yes,
mean,
yeah.
They're still wrangling over Article 9 and 10. They still haven't sorted that out. And also they're still stuck on Article 13, which is tobacco advertising, promotion and sponsorship. But it does seem to be that they've already punted some things out to Committee B to get their workload down a bit. But it looks like Committee B's overrunning now. So Committee B is sitting till 10 o'clock tonight, probably because they're running out of room because they're sorting out Committee A issues. So there's still a few things to do. They've settled Article 18, which is about environment. So that's the one that could result in cigarette filters being banned. But we don't know because it was passed with amendments. So we've got to see what the amendments are. So there might be something struck off. But apart from that, yeah, and they're still talking about novel and emerging products as well. So hopefully that's an argument going backwards and forwards, and that's where we hope that the delegations from countries which are liberal on harm reduction, that's where we hope they're making their voice known.
And we're hearing some doublespeak come out of the World Health Organization, and that's obviously very concerning to all of us. And the one thing that I read was they say that harm reduction is at the heart of the treaty. It is not. I mean, if you are not embracing these new products, harm reduction is not at the heart of the treaty. Did you see this statement from yesterday? And if you didn't, what are your thoughts on hearing something like that?
Yeah, it was in this morning's bulletin, and it was a whole article. Written, you may not be surprised to find, by Vital Strategies and Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids.
We had them visit us.
Yeah. Jorge Alday and Mark Hurley wrote it. And it is quite astonishing, and it gives you an insight into how how these people think. I mean, for years at these COP meetings, they've been avoiding saying anything about harm reduction. So I think over time they felt pressure, and these guys have decided they're going to address it. So they wrote an article entitled "Tobacco Harm Reduction is about population health, not industry profits." And that's where they said harm reduction is at the heart of the treaty. I mean, it is in the treaty, it's in Article 1D, but they've generally shied away from it. But what they're saying, in short, is tobacco harm reduction at the individual level, which, as they say, is often the focus of the industry's messaging, is not the same as harm reduction at population level, which is the purpose of the WHO FCTC. Now, what they're saying is that nicotine addiction, they call it, is rapidly increasing, particularly amongst youth. And what they're saying is this is harmful. So on a population level, they say more nicotine use is harmful because there is some harm to it. But by doing that, they've got to completely ignore the fact that smoking rates are coming down. It's kind of them saying, smoking rates have come down, and that's all us, nothing to do with vaping or anything else. And so therefore, nicotine increasing is a harm on top of lowering smoking rates. They think the two are unrelated. They say that basically the low smoking rates have absolutely nothing to do with safer nicotine products, which is obviously deluded. Of course there has to be an effect from lots of people taking up nicotine.
And part of the reason why smoking rates are coming down and more people are choosing safer alternatives is because of this grassroots movement. Lindsay, we have a grassroots movement of consumers, of doctors, of scientists, of policy folks. Talk to us about what you've seen this week and how the influence, and not just with Good Cop, but how I think the influence of these consumers and the scientists are starting to seep into the World Health Organization, because I'm really starting to see that, we had CTFK over here yesterday. We had, the vital strategies. They made a visit. So we are on their radar screen. They know that we're here. So describe, what has happened in the last 5 to 10 years to see this growth in this movement to provide these alternatives?
Well, I mean, when I was up this morning, I was like, how can I describe what I'm seeing out of the World Health Organization and COP10? And it's mostly a complete ignorance about the people who smoke and a complete disdain for them. And I think that's very reflective in all of our public health policies. When you look at, if you were a person who smokes, getting access to what these products are, you're getting them from the industry because public health refuses to actually give factual information. And that's really unfortunate. And I know there's so many regulations across the country across the globe about what you can and cannot say about these products. So even the consumers of these products are, it's a free speech issue, especially also, but that's just a lack of science, and a lack of empathy for the people who smoke. It seems that we're so focused. Seeing that Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids had at least 40 representatives that are attending, and COP10 or Bad Cop, I get it. I completely get, protecting the next generation from becoming people who smoke. We have to recognize that e-cigarettes and other products are less harmful, and we should celebrate that, but we should also go into the reasons why youth are using these products. And even though we're collecting all this data about the real reasons, they're ignoring it. It just turns into this, it's a tactic of the industry trying to come and hook your kids. And again, one of the best things about vaping is that it is truly a consumer-driven revolution, and it actually forced really big companies to change their products, and in a better way than what the World Health Organization could ever hope for that. We should be celebrating companies that are choosing to actually, want to profit mostly off of safer products instead of profiting off of the products that cause the most harm. Instead of that, we're blocking it, but we're not also blocking them from selling those harmful products. So COP seems like a lot of complaining, a lot of and mostly just it's a conference of just people that complain about the industry, but doesn't really offer any solutions. And it's really, I think we've had a little bit of, I think that we've done with Good Cop a good amount of work, and I think it's also just the global community of people. I think I've put enough pressure on these delegates going that they are starting to question the WHO, because really, when you look at the FCTC, it shouldn't be a zero-sum game. What some policies, and again, this is where the tobacco harm reduction is very individual. Not every product is going to work for every single person. Some people might be able to quit smoking using a vaping product. Some people might have to use oral nicotine products. I can't wait for heated tobacco products to come into America, like in full force, to see the amount of adults that we'll see switching, especially with our anti-vaping campaign. It is very individualized, and having more options is what is key, not, very limited options and over-regulation. But hopefully we'll get some pushback.
So let me drill down on a few of those points, because you make some excellent points, is that we have a grassroots movement. We have a consumer-driven movement, but it's also data-driven.
Yes.
Is that we have the science, and every day, every month, every year that goes by, we have more science that says that these products are less harmful. And not only do we have more science, we have products that are getting better at delivering nicotine.
The long-term science that they say we're lacking.
And the long-term science, yeah. And the disdain they have for smokers. I find this fascinating, and we talked about this on RegWatch yesterday, is the disdain they have for people that smoke, and also people that quit smoking with these products. And that should be celebrated. When you have someone that quits smoking, however they do it, whether it's cold turkey, whether with a vape, with gum, with patches, however they do it, that should be celebrated. And I came up with this idea a couple days ago. When someone quits drugs, they get a chip. They get a 30-day chip because they're celebrated, and they absolutely should be celebrated when they give up the addiction of drugs. Why not the same for smokers? The people who quit.
That's what is the vape advocacy, is kind of like the AA for,
but they should get
people who smoke.
They should get a chip and
Yes.
says it's been 30 days since I've had a cigarette, thanks to vaping or whatever method that they use. And just one more thing, when they talk about the kids, what about the kids that are in households right now where the parents are smoking, and whether it's the father who can't go out and throw a football or kick a soccer ball or throw a baseball because he's smoking and he needs an off-ramp. So what about those kids? I know they're worried about the future generation, but there's a generation that is growing up in a household full of smoke. And that's what these advocacy groups need to recognize. And this really goes back to the opening session or the opening statement I made about my childhood. And being in a household where my father smoked 3.5 packs of cigarettes a day, he didn't have the physical energy to go out and do sports because he smoked. So I wish CTFK would look at those kids and understand why we're doing this.
Well, also, it's a good point. There was a study done that they're looking at the most effective way of reducing youth smoking rates was, growing up in households that don't smoke. So in looking at that, but you're absolutely right. That actually is one of the biggest determinants of whether a youth is going to use a tobacco product is the household that they came from. They're more, the kids who grew up in a household with adult smoking are more, I don't know the exact number, but they're way more likely to be using the product themselves. And yes, they should be. It would be a very conflicting message to a youth when you think about it. Like, my dad quit smoking using this product, and then I go into school, and it's like the demonization. And we've seen it. And the states and state associations have talked about, their kids coming back and kind of being like, quit vaping, you're going to die. And it's like, this is the only thing that actually is going to save them. So it's very unfortunate. It just feels like it's misinformation and alarmism, and trying to, the FCTC, and after coming here and being seeing really what it is, Martin does a really great job at explaining it, but still, it's a whole different thing to be here. It just seems like they want to keep perpetuating the smoking problem. I mean.
And Martin, you had a...
Yeah, well, this is the thing. At RegWatch yesterday, Brent played a clip of Janine Timmons of Canada, which I haven't seen before. And she was saying, she quit smoking with vaping. And she's saying, where's the parade? Why are we not being congratulated for this? And this is the thing. What you've just said there is it's almost like they seem to want to perpetuate smoking. Well, if you've got someone who's quit using vaping and they're being criticised for it, they're going to think, well, maybe I made the wrong choice, and they go back to smoking. I mean, this is the messaging the WHO is getting wrong. They should be, even if they don't like these products, they should still be congratulating people who've quit using them.
And at times it just gets lost in so much bureaucracy, because you talk about the working groups, the expert groups, is that the World Health Organization is so concerned about the bureaucracy rather than solving the problem. And it really goes back to the demonization of the tobacco industry. I mean, that's where their focus is. And again, I go back to what the gentleman from St. Kitts and Nevis said, is that he had no love for the tobacco industry, but he had love for harm reduction because he worked in harm reduction in so many other areas of health. So looking forward, today's day 5, and really day 5, and not only that, but for the next year and a half, because the next COP will be in 2025. So technically next year.
2025? I thought, have they announced that they're actually doing it in 2025?
I mean, it
Oh,
would
wait,
be the...
I would expect it to be 2025,
Well, it
November.
should be. That's when, yeah.
So day 5, Martin,
year.
and what we're going to see, and then I guess tomorrow is when they announce, kind of like FIFA when they announce where the next World Cup is going to be. WHO will announce tomorrow where the next COP will be. So what is your prediction on today, but also where do you think we'll be going to for the good COP number 2?
Well, firstly, today's going to be those articles they can't get agreement on, and they're really struggling. It seems, Article 9 and 10 they've been talking about since the first day, really, and they still haven't reached consensus. So it's Article 13, TAPS, tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, and Article 9 and 10, and also they're still talking about novel emerging products. So they're still on that, and they've punted stuff off to Committee B. So we expect that they'll be sort of discussing that all day. Now, the original time, there were 2 times set out for the closing plenary, and what they would like to do is get the closing plenary done tomorrow between 10 and 1, just like the opening plenary. But they have a reserve time from 3 till 6. I think 3 p.m. till 6, and it looks like it looks more and more likely they're probably only going to start announcing things at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because of the problems they're getting through the schedule. So who knows where it would be? Well, I've been talking to people all week and saying that, and Jeannie agrees with me that we think it's going to be in Eastern Mediterranean somewhere, EMRO region, because it's the only region that hasn't been given a COP before, and considering. And this is only a guess. It's one of them things. If there was a bookie that would take the bet, I would put a bet on United Emirates because climate COP 28 was in Dubai, and I think Dubai is trying to set itself on the world stage, and I think it would probably bid for something like COP 11. But look, I might be completely wrong.
So, Lindsay, we have this COP wrapping up, and the next one in probably 2025 somewhere. What's your guess on where it is, and what do we do between now and then to build this movement? I mean, you have done a lot of work. You and Martin have done a lot of work to put this movement together. The World Vapors Alliance is here. We have representatives from 14 countries. We've done an amazing job, but how do we grow this? I mean, I don't want to say grow this movement because it's already really big, but how do we grow this conference so in less than 2 years when we come back together, we have a bigger presence? What are your thoughts, and where is it going to be?
I mean, well, I'm hearing that it's going to be in the Middle East. I'm assuming it's going to be in Dubai. It's one of the easier countries to get in and out of from people from across the globe. If they do it there, I think it also could be in some African country as well, like more south. As far as like a policy message and what people can do between now and then, coordination is key. We all need to get on as much as I can't stand the Bloomberg-funded organizations under his auspice, they are very coordinated. They say the same things. And when you're talking to policymakers, that's really effective. When they're sitting there for 2 hours hearing the same thing over and over again, they're going to go back and remember that instead of a bunch of little messages. And I think, focusing on what your policymakers are doing is a key. What is your country doing? Is your country invested in helping reduce the smoking rate, or is your country invested in there's some countries out there that are, the government controls the tobacco industry, and the WHO loves those countries. But also, what are the policies, how restricted is access to safer alternatives? Look at the information you're getting, too. And honestly, I'm big at shaming them. I'm big at shaming, elected officials and especially bureaucrats that, these are unelected, unaccountable health officials that are determining whether you have access to these products. And unfortunately, most of them have never, ever smoked. I would love, the FCTC could change if they just got 10 people helping run it that actually were former smokers or current smokers. Sorry, Skip, for dropping that word. Bring back the compassion. Again, like you brought up, we celebrate, people in recovery on various substances. the continued use of nicotine, I don't think should still be demonized if you're doing it in a way that's safer and also safer to the people around you. Oral nicotine, there is no, effects to bystanders on it. But in vaping, I know there's a lot of like misinformation and bad studies. And then, for the scientists, I would sit here and say also, quit trying to look at the bad and how many ways that this can go wrong. I don't know. If that was the way that we did everything in our life, nothing would get done. We always, hope for the best, but plan for rain. I mean, it's not anything. It's alarming for you to be changing the data, changing, the way you're doing your methodology just because you want to prove your hypothesis because you've got a complete disdain for tobacco and anything that's related to it.
Yeah, that's the misapplication of the precautionary principle, isn't it? If you're over precautionary, you end up being reckless, and this is basically what the COP and the WHO is doing with all this.
Yeah, and getting back to your guess, Africa, that would be a bold move by the World Health Organization, considering that region is very dependent upon tobacco farming. And I think, listen, if they did that,
go to Brazil.
There's a word that I want to use, but I won't because we're live streaming. But it would take a lot of guts to go to an African nation and talk about tobacco control for sure. And listen, I think you're absolutely right. We have to encourage countries to continue, St. Kitts and Nevis, Guatemala, Brazil, that are bringing up these issues. We need them to see that they are recognized for this, that people are recognizing that they are concerned about tobacco harm reduction because so many governments are trying to limit these products.
Yes, you should absolutely be appreciative of the governments who are choosing to step out and take this approach.
And really, I would say stay in contact with the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Again, Lindsay, you do such an amazing work in the States by looking at the numbers. And it's amazing because the numbers don't lie. And when you look at the smoking rates that have decreased, the e-cigarette usage that has decreased in the United States, is that you would think it's a completely out of control problem. It absolutely is not. The numbers don't lie. But listen, Martin, why don't you give us a preview for today, what to expect today, some of the panels. I know the next panel we have some heavy hitters when it comes to policy.
Yeah, I think talking about tax in the next one, but we've got one after that on best and worst countries promoting tobacco harm reduction, and a consumer session in the afternoon. What do consumers need to do in 2024 and beyond? So that's a highlight for consumers watching. That'll be at 2 p.m. So do make sure you tune in for that. And then we're going to have a change. I think we're going to have a change in schedule at the end, aren't we? We're going to have a closing session of Good Cop, where we're going to talk about what all of our esteemed experts thought of the week's proceedings, and we'll have a nice kind of celebratory chat about it.
Yeah, and so I'm going to call an audible here, and I know Courtney and Kara back in D.C. are not going to like this, but I would like to encourage people during the course of the day, if you have questions that you want to submit for the closing session, please send them. I guess you can do it via the live stream on Twitter.
You can email me, lindsay@protectingtaxpayers.org. Or hit me up on Twitter.
Yeah, on Twitter or X, whatever it's called today. Happy to answer questions during the 3 o'clock Eastern to talk about really anything you want to talk about when it comes to tobacco harm reduction, because I know a lot of people have been following on Twitter. I know a lot of people have been watching the live stream, and you may have questions. So
this is your conference. It's the conference of the
Conference
people.
of the People, and that's why we invited Dr. King over. That's why when Vital Strategies walked in, we did not kick them out.
No.
It's a lovely
Open,
hotel with a lovely
transparent.
lobby, and they were able to enjoy
Get
it.
some factual information.
But let's take a break for about 8 minutes, and we'll be back with our first panel. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, that was painless.
Okay, everybody, I think it's time to start our next panel, which is entitled The Best Practices for Tax Policy. For those who, so welcome to everyone here, both in person and joining us on the live stream. My name is Tim Andrews. I'm from Americans for Tax Reform and the Tholos Foundation, and we're delighted to be part of this conference. Formerly, I was with the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. Therefore, I have a very, very good understanding of how ridiculously high taxes have bad unintended consequences. Joining me today are Grant Carlson from the National Taxpayers Union in the United States, and also Pablo from the Argentinian Taxpayers Association. So we've got a great panel lined up to discuss the really fundamental issue on tax policy and its unintended consequences in terms of how we are now already seeing overly high taxes on e-cigarettes driving people back to smoking. We've seen how this has happened in quite a few states in the United States. In a few other countries, there's now more than enough economic modelling that we know what a tax increase on e-cigarettes will mean for the number of smokers. So Grant, starting with you, if you could discuss maybe what we're seeing in the United States on tax policy, both in terms on e-cigarettes and some of its unintended consequences.
Sure. I'm Grant Carlson. I'm with the National Taxpayers Union. We're the nation's oldest taxpayers union. We represent about 300,000 members in the United States on taxpayer-related issues. I think a lot of the activity right now in the U.S. is on the state level. Particularly looking to find parity or to tax non-tobacco nicotine products or harm reduction products at the same level as tobacco products, which is definitely very harmful in terms of helping people find those safe alternatives, whether it's vaping or nicotine pouches. There's also been recent discussions on the federal level of banning Zyn by Majority Leader Schumer, which definitely registered some significant pushback. There's a lot of movement on menthol, obviously, which I think we can discuss further. But as states are coming into new budget cycles and they don't have all that COVID funding that they had before, they're looking for new revenue sources. And I think a harmful trend would be treating non-tobacco nicotine products the same way or the same tax treatment as tobacco-related products.
So moving to Argentina, it's my understanding that while it's currently, these products are illegal in Argentina, the new budget actually covers like tax revenue that they expect to get under legalization. So what's the situation in Argentina at the moment? And if products are legalized, how should they be taxed?
Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Well, yes. The product is legal in Argentina now, but it's being sold everywhere. So we think there is a momentum for legalization now, and the tax situation will be like ideally, it will help to either reduce our taxes or to help balance the budget, because maybe you know we have a runaway inflation and the president is trying to balance the budget. So this tax revenue will help either end the inflationary tax, which is legally it's not a tax, but everyone thinks of it as taxation because it takes money from your pocket. Or it could either help to reduce taxes on other products like milk or food or something like that, which also helps. Now, regarding to the problems it will bring in taxation, Argentina is a federation, so there will be state level taxes and national taxes. It could happen that if it is regarded as a tobacco product, it will be as taxed as any cigarette. So that's one possibility. And then the debate will get more like technical in health issues more than in tax issues. So I think both sides of the debates will like clash in order to tax it more or tax it less. If it's regarded as medicine, it should be actually tax-free or tax reduced. So if it's given under prescription, and the debates and the agreement of all scientists is that it could be regarded as medicine, then it should actually be tax exempted. But I think the consumer choice option is like the more viable for Argentina now, and take it as as another informed consent from the consumer. So you go, you buy it, you know what you're buying, why you're buying it, and that should be basically it. So I think the tax landscape will be something like starting as another tobacco product, legalization, and then we will see what's going on and what agreements can be achieved from all parts of the health debate.
So, Grant, seeing that we're seeing in the United States, a lot of states are doing taxes but not only different levels and different models, and you've got the federal equalization plans. You have, at least in one state, proposals to tax vaping products higher than combustibles, which seems quite insane. What sort of principles should people bear in mind, like for legislators, when they're implementing tax policies? I mean, I think realistically, all of us in this room would say, don't tax them at all. This is a life-saving product, exempt everything, prescription or not. But realistically, are there any principles that people should bear in mind when designing policies?
Well, I think, yeah, there's a pretty good study from the Tax Foundation that found for every $1 in taxes increased on cigarettes, illegal smuggling goes up by 30%. And that has costs for states, whether it's incarceration, enforcement, et cetera. So there definitely is a point where taxes become so excessive that you're just enabling a legal market. You see that particularly in New York City, where a pack of cigarettes can be near $20, or California, where it's upwards of 12 or 15. And a lot of the illicit groups are getting involved here, and it costs states a lot of money to enforce that. They end up losing tax revenue. A really good example is Massachusetts, which banned menthol cigarettes. They barely saw any change in actual smoking rates in Massachusetts, but New Hampshire saw nearly 100% increase in cigarette sales. Rhode Island to the south saw nearly a 20% increase in menthol cigarette sales. And the state of Massachusetts was left with the bill in terms of lost tax revenue of well over $100 million, but also enforcement and incarceration of illegal cigarettes. So I think that's the trend we're seeing at state level.
Okay, yes, smuggling is an important point. I think taxation should be as high as to disincentivize consumption in tobacco products, but not high enough to incentivize smuggling. Now, where is that point exactly? That's difficult. Some have argued that one way to estimate this is to take the boxes from the street and make a statistic on how many illegal products are being sold, so you can regulate the taxes according to how much smuggling is being in the country. But it's a main issue to avoid the smuggling product, the taxes that incentivizes smuggling. Now, regarding the health issue, I think that since there is an agreement on, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is like an agreement in short-term and middle-term effects, but there is not an agreement on long-term effects. So in this case, I think the tax policy should reflect that, and I mean, the long term is eventually coming. So when the debate is over, there should be some sort of refund. If it can be to the consumers, it should be to someone. I mean, maybe NGOs that promote the end of cancer or something like that. But the government shouldn't keep this money once the debate is completely settled. So some sort of refund in the future could be a policy.
And I love that idea that all vapers in the future will get a tax refund by the government for being overtaxed because governments base their decision on flawed science. I somehow doubt that'll happen, but that would be a great idea. The other question to ask on, and I think we should probably increase this broader than just tax policies, but I mean, we speak a lot of this product at this conference about e-cigarettes and their role in harm reduction. But there are other harm reduction products out there that are growing in popularity as well, which are such as nicotine pouches, snus. I mean, heat-not-burn is sort of probably similar enough to e-cigarettes, but like it's all the product of the emerging oral category, which you mentioned that Chuck Schumer is now trying to ban. Are there any things that people should bear in mind about tax or regulatory policy for these products?
Well, I think Health policy is also good tax policy. When you look at healthcare expenses in the United States that are outpacing inflation, Medicare, which goes to senior citizens, went up in 2022 by almost 6%, nearly $1 trillion in spending. Medicaid for low-income Americans was around $820 billion in 2002. That was almost a 9% increase year over year. So taxing these products, whether it's vapes or smokeless tobacco or Zyn, et cetera, or tobacco pouches, these harm reduction products at the same level as cigarettes would harm the ability to address these health-related issues and costs. If you look at the groups that smoke in the United States, it's largely more senior citizens and people in the lower income area, and figuring out ways to reduce these healthcare costs is a good taxpayer policy.
Yeah. Again, with the health issue, also some sort of, I will endorse the idea of refunds also in health issues. Why? Because the more successful it gets, the more refunds you should get. And some sort of key performance indicator or something should do the solution for this refund. So the idea is to give incentives through taxes and to retribute the reduces on the cost of healthcare for all the citizens. So I think tax policy could help that way.
So I think you raise a very interesting question, Grant, about a lot of people who smoke are sort of lower income earners and things such as that. We know that taxes on these products are some of the most regressive taxes out there. We also know that taxes on tobacco itself can be so high in some countries that for a low-income earner, if you're a smoker, it's more than half your income. Like if you're average sort of if you're a low-income earner in Australia who smokes cigarettes, a pack a day, that is half your income gone a week, which is horrific from a equity perspective. So do you think perhaps there's a movement, and if we're looking at lower income countries, but also in higher ones, maybe we should be thinking more like sort of social justice warriors and focusing on arguments of inequality a little bit more than we are at the moment?
I think that's a good argument. And also, from a crime perspective, when you put in taxes that are so regressive and so high that you enable an illegal market, that hurts some of those neighborhoods. Some of the more low-income neighborhoods that you saw with Eric Garner in Staten Island.
Yeah, I mean, for those who aren't aware, Eric Garner was killed by police for selling loose cigarettes. This was a very, and his family has actually come out quite strongly against a lot of FDA's prohibitionary policies because they know the effect this will have. And those of you who were here yesterday, you would know that in Australia, tobacco taxes are so high that you saw in the first 8 months of last year, according to the Australian Federal Police, you saw 60 arson attacks and at least 2 murders because of the gangland war that's involved in the illicit tobacco trade in Australia. That point about crime, and you see the same thing in New Zealand as well, but there were dozens of cases of stores being, like cars just sort of ramming into stores to just steal all of their products. New Zealand person from the New Zealand Taxpayers Union wasn't able to make this panel, but he was telling us yesterday when we were in conversation about how most sort of places that sell tobacco and vaping products now have like bollards and things and like metal bars outside so that cars can't smash into them and grab all of the products. And even then they still do. Like he was relating a story like 2 weeks ago about a car smashing into the bollards, not getting out, and then having like jackhammers and things to cut away all the metal bars and still getting in to steal the cigarettes. So like this is such a clear consequence. And you're right, it is usually low-income earners that suffer. Like when you have drive-by shootings and things, the people caught in the crossfire are generally not your very, very wealthy people, and those who sell things as well. Because, I mean, one of the things that I don't know, Grant, if you want to discuss about this particular issue is FDA says, oh, we're not going to enforce this against individuals if we do prohibition. We're only going to enforce it against stores. But if you're consuming an illicit product that's not taxed, that's still a crime in every single state. So state police can, will, and do enforce these things.
That's true, and particularly, I think this is particularly concerning with the FDA's proposed ban on menthol cigarettes, which are, the cigarette market is about $80 billion in the U.S., and $30 billion of it is menthol cigarette related. And making that market illegal would create a huge illicit market for the Mexican cartels and other groups, and that would definitely harm some of the most low-income Americans in the country and the neighborhoods they live in. And as we've seen legalization of other things in the United States, whether it's cannabis, et cetera, the cartels are looking for other ways to raise revenue, and cigarettes and menthol cigarettes would be one of those.
So what's the black market situation, not in Argentina or other neighboring countries? Like, is there a problem with black market?
Yeah, we have a huge black market. They come from our neighborhood, our neighbor country, Paraguay. They smuggle the cigarettes to Argentina. But no one exactly knows how deep the smuggling is, how bad of a problem it is. So it's not being addressed as an issue for the authorities, but everyone knows there is a huge chunk of the market being illegal. Luckily, we are not seeing violence towards these smugglers. It's very different with other products like drugs, like marijuana or cocaine. Now the city of Rosario is like the Argentinian Chicago, we said, because it's basically taken by the drugs mafia. But regarding cigarettes, somehow it's kind of accepted. Once in a while, there are like these raids from the police, and they take the illegal products and whatever. But maybe the thing is to stable, as I said previously, a tax that will not incentivize the illegal market. Maybe where is the balance exactly is more the question than fighting the illegal market with the enforcement of the law.
Do you think that the tax argument could be used successfully to try and encourage countries where it's currently illegal to legalize it? Because you mentioned in Argentina at the moment that they're trying to help balance the budget, etc., and that e-cigarette taxes could play a part in that. Like, there is so much opposition in some countries because I think they're scared of losing combustible tax revenue, particularly in countries such as India, where the state owns the main tobacco manufacturer. So you not only have the taxes, but you have the loss in manufacturing revenue. I know that as a movement, we're very, very hesitant to ever support any tax, and for good reason. In our ideal world, there'll be no tax on, well, anything, but particularly these products. But should we perhaps be more aggressive in arguing, you should legalize these products because you'll be able to get a lot more tax revenue as a result?
Yeah, I think that's a sound argument, more of a well-regulated market. I think protects consumers, protects them from crime, protects them from illicit or poor products. We can go back to bathtub gin during Prohibition, which harmed a lot of people. I think it better serves your citizenry to have a well-regulated tobacco market than an illicit one.
Yeah, the thing is the prohibition isn't working in Argentina and probably in most countries that are banning these products. So legalizing and regulating the market helps the consumers for one side. And the tax argument is also a compelling argument. Now, the danger is getting this revenue for new expenses. It should be this revenue to reduce other taxes and other expenses. Now, this also helps, I think, to the advocacy progress. Why? Because you link these products to, I don't know, to as I said, to food or something that the people more in general think as important. So we are legalizing this and taxing this, and you are seeing a reduction in other of your taxes and your costs. So it could also be like the income tax, but even better for consumer taxes. So I think the tax argument is like quite compelling.
I think that given it's a shorter panel this morning, we'll just we won't be taking up the entire hour for this panel. But I think just to sort of conclude, what further, like if you were to say that lawmakers should have sort of two main points in mind when designing tax policy, what would you say that those should be? Because I know, Grant, that we're going to, in the next 3 months, we're going to be going through this and how many state legislatures in the United States. And what fundamental principles do you think?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about the United States is you have 50 different states and different territories, and they all have different tax levels on cigarettes. And you can see in a lot of the states which have the highest levels where there is a breaking point where they're actually losing revenue. And because in the United States, there are no hard borders between states. It's very easy to move cigarettes from a low tax state, like where I live in Virginia, to a high tax state like New York, which is a 3 to 4 hour U-Haul ride from the Costco in Northern Virginia, where you can buy as many cartons of cigarettes as you want. So I think that lawmakers need to strike a balance and maintain a well-regulated market and understand that that helps consumers.
And the only other thing I would add to that is lawmakers, I think, this is sort of my answer to the question, remember that different products should be taxed and treated differently. Not only is, as you said earlier, the insanity of treating something 95% safer at the same tax level as combustible cigarettes, but even within reduced risk products, different products should be treated differently. You should tax a open system differently to a closed system because they are different systems. You should treat an e-cigarette differently to a heat-not-burn system because these are different systems. And I think that several years ago, and this is when we saw a lot of our friends getting into fights because if you had one tax rate, it would always advantage some at the expense of others. And so you had too many people on our side maybe disagreeing with each other over the model of taxation. And then when we moved to the sort of the bifurcated models where different products were taxed not at different rates, but the tax was calculated differently to make it more fair and equitable. That once again solved a lot of those problems. And I think we're possibly going to start seeing that now in the United States and other countries as well.
And I think to answer your principal's question is that purely nicotine products should not be taxed at the same rate as tobacco products because that harms reduction efforts and that harms healthcare efforts.
Principles for...
To avoid the smuggling, so the tax should not be as high to give an incentive, and make the advocacy popular. So link this product to a tax reduction in a more popular product. So those things should do the magic, maybe.
Okay. Well, it's now 10:30, so we're going to be finishing this panel a little bit earlier than it was set in the schedule. I would like to remind everyone, it was announced earlier, but if you're in this room at the moment, that the 3 o'clock science panel is now being replaced with a general conclusion and a question and answer, because we want to sort of end this conference on a very, not just a sort of positive, fun note for all of us, but with sort of, what our vision is for the future. So I would strongly encourage everybody to make sure that you are here for that and that you would participate. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us both in the room and online.
Hello, everybody out there in here. Today is our final day of Good Cop, Bad Cop. What a crazy 5 days. And as we've said before, these panels are going to evolve with what's happening because we are a group of people that know exactly what's happening inside that building in Panama. It's kind of leaky, if I could use that term. Sorry, I just thought it was funny. So today we have, I'm just honored to moderate an incredible group of people who have some of the best knowledge, especially when it comes to tobacco harm reduction products. We have Dr. Rohan from India, Jeannie Cameron from the UK. We also have Dr. Robert Sussman, and at the end over there we have Lindsay Stroud, and this is your first time on a panel.
Yes.
And
This
she
is
is
opening
from
session.
the USA.
Yep.
And those of you...
We had some schedule changes, okay? Again, a rapid response event.
Exactly. And my name is Maria P. We're here today to talk about the different regulatory processes for tobacco harm reduction from country to country. However, today it is being debated on the floor at COP when it comes to having... they are calling on them novelty, and I don't actually know when the term novelty becomes old, because vaping products have been around for over 20 years right now, if you think about it. Like 2001, they first started coming out in the market.
Yeah, 2003.
2003?
With the Hanlick, I believe, yes.
Yeah. So just going down the road, who do you think has the best THR practices in the world? I don't think the best in the world comparably. I don't think anyone has the best.
Perhaps
Jeannie.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I would say if I had to say which one had the best, I would probably say New Zealand. I think the fact that they actually had Swedish snus, and then when they brought in their very good legislation to endorse tobacco harm reduction, they actually decided to ban snus there. So that is a failing of it, but I do think that New Zealand, it's actually has supported harm reduction and mentions it very clearly in its national legislation as being the reason why they've put this forward, and they are enabling the products to coexist and wanting to phase out smoking. So I think that would probably be the leading one. It's still got things it can improve on. I wrote a list of who I thought was good or bad. I actually think the US is not particularly good either, but I say that from a very different reason, and that's the process for getting products onto the market. I think it's the only country in the world that follows a requirement for only the richest and most well-funded companies to be able to get products onto the market, whereas, say, in the UK, you can be a very small company, and most of the other places in Europe, as long as you actually meet the standards required to notify a product, you're able to put a product on the market. So I think from what we know is the free world that is supposed to be there to encourage entrepreneurship, it really is the worst, and I think they should look at a different system. More commensurate with the rest of the world in getting alternative products onto the market rather than following a drug policy, which, as we've seen, prevents some very good and very helpful products not be getting marketing authorization proposals. Anyway, I'll let someone else have a go.
Dr. R.
So I think there are quite a few countries, rather than saying one or two countries.
Yeah.
Every country that has actually looked at the science and come out with a favorable response for their citizens, looking at long-term health benefits, looking at long-term reduction in healthcare costs, looking at society being able to choose a product using their basic God-given human right to take something which is better than what they were doing before. I think all of those governments need to be commended because they took the first step. They were the pioneers. They went through the data. They saw they had open-ended discussions, and they came to the conclusion that this is what it is, and it looks to be better, and they actually go ahead and implement those policies. and the citizens and the population of that country benefit from that decision. So I think it can be divided into a pretty stable line where you have the East and the West. The West has been more open to uptake this information, utilize that information, make policies which are favorable. The East has had some initial resistance. Many countries are still opposing. Many countries are still, criminalizing it, right? So it's a very, very big It's a very big paradox. On one side, you have people who are criminalizing it. They're banning it. You're even up to the point of being imprisoned. Whereas on the other side, it's a complete open market. It's available everywhere on the street. People are choosing it instead of the harmful tobacco, and that's a very diplomatic way of putting it.
Lindsay?
Well, I think all countries are terrible at tobacco harm reduction, information sharing. I think every single country's public health authorities or public health trade associations is what I call a lot of those groups, as far the spreading alarmism about safer alternatives to cigarettes, including. It's not just vaping. It seems that that's their big one that they push. But I mean, watch, you're going to see pouches are going to be this big, dose, and just the lack of. There's so many adults who are still smoking that are completely ignorant about safer products, and that's because of their own health. But looking around the world, it used to be the UK seemed like a really great place for, regulating vapor products and also allowing smaller businesses to bring them to market. Then you've got countries like India and Mexico, which is when I was putting this panel together, they've, banned it. And I think that that's really, but not banning cigarettes, just a really bad policy not to, do. But it is complex. I mean, I understand, you're having millions of people using this. You want to have some oversight on regulating these products, but you don't want to over-regulate them that they're no longer useful for people who smoke and are using them to quit smoking. I guess, the theme is going back to the people, and the people who smoke should not have complete disdain and be stigmatized even more than what they are, and especially not from public health.
All right. I personally live in a country that I feel like I'm on one of those roundabouts when it comes to vaping. It's like, okay, we started off and, oh my goodness, we're going to be the first place to regulate it. So we're ready to get off on the exit of great regulations. And then, oh my goodness, we got cut off. So now we're just going in this circle of, I have no idea. Like every time I wake up, I'm so worried about a new announcement from Health Canada because I don't know the direction that it's going to go. Currently, right now, the path that we're on is engagement with lived experience. We have one of the best drug policies for people who use drugs. And they're slowly, through advocating, incorporating nicotine into that same policy. But it's sort of like right now in a province, we finally got those pouches legally done. And there's a province that is fighting at the same time to legalize opiates and to make them easily accessible, and now making nicotine pouches very difficult to obtain and through a pharmacist. Not a pharmacy, a pharmacist. So I'm not saying.
Oh, the
I'm
hypocrisy in harm reduction? That's
Yeah.
what I call it. And we have that in the States. There's a major hypocrisy in harm reduction. The people who are actively fighting against tobacco harm reduction policies are promoting and also subsidizing opioid harm reduction.
And I have no problem with that. Like, I have
Yes.
no problem. HR is HR. You
Yes,
need to
harm
own
reduction,
your walk.
yes.
And if you don't like a part of it, you have to dig into that compassion that you're asking people who are against what you're doing. Dig into that same compassion that you're expecting people who do not believe in harm reduction for drug use and apply it to those that smoke. Do not be a hypocrite.
Yes.
I would like to emphasize the role of technology in regulation. The background is in those good old days when we still did not have this dictatorship, this McCarthyism. In 2018, I participated in several forums. In those days, even the very extreme opponents and detractors were willing to talk to us or willing to listen. I had once a debate on TV, on a major TV station in Mexico, with an oncologist who is regarded as the guru of anti-smoking. And he would say, no, 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 I agree with you that we have to regulate them, but at cigarettes, because they are tobacco products. And I say, you say they are tobacco, what's your criterion? And all this I'm telling you is because to regulate, you have to understand the products, okay? He would say, because they are administrators of nicotine, and nicotine is taken from the tobacco. In those days, there were no artificial nicotine, whatever. Says, so it is a tobacco product because it is derived from tobacco. He added that it's also the tobacco companies are promoting, etc. You know all this discourse. But I avoided trying to argue that it is not a tobacco company, a tobacco industry strategy. I avoided that. I concentrated on the technology. And I told him, I remember saying, a carriage pulled by horses or a motorcycle or a bicycle are means of transportation. They transport people from one place to the other. An airplane or a jet are also means of transportation. They transport people from one place to the other. But it would be crazy to regulate them in the same pattern. It is just impossible. And what you are saying is because you are completely ignoring a very important aspect in regulation, which is the technological makeup of the products. Just with smoking, we are dealing with a 19th century technology. Here we have a 21st century technology. The variety of products, the devices, etc., even if they have this common. I didn't get anywhere, but why am I saying this? It's because there is a tendency. We know the prohibitionists, the people who want to prohibit or ban. There's nothing to talk with these people. But among people who are detractors of harm reduction, there is a large crowd that agrees with regulation. And the debate has to be with them. And this debate has to incorporate not only science in the sense that emissions are less toxic or much less toxic or different. We have to emphasize that these are very different products. These are like a jet and a car. They're very different products, and we have to emphasize this in order to argue the case for a differentiated regulation. It has to be different from the regulation that would be applied to combustible products. And this is the key issue.
I think
right?
maybe people would like to know that about 5 minutes ago in the negotiating room of the COP, the discussion started, that commenced in terms of the decisions and future as to whether Article 1D, the tobacco harm reduction strategies, aligning it with supply and demand strategies would be an intersessional working group would be set up to do that. Now, what we haven't realised, because we haven't really had direct access to the room, is that all week this has been on the agenda very strongly, but it's been under the agenda item of Article 9 and 10, which relates to cigarette contents and emissions. So we haven't realised that this. Everybody keeps saying they haven't had agreement on Articles 9 and 10, so we can't get to the other issues. The reason why we haven't had any agreement on Articles 9 and 10 is because that is where the tobacco harm reduction debate is actually happening. And so now they've moved into, just I heard a minute ago, into an area where they are going to be doing it. And it's what we did here was the proposal put forward by St Kitts and Nevis. It's 3 pages long, it's very detailed, and it does promote even civil society that has an interest and an awareness, which would be all of the doctors and others and consumers and everyone else, to be listened to. So it seems, as far as I can see, very strong. But I thought everyone might like to know that that's all happening right now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
How did you not, like, just jump up and say that?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
I would have.
And
I'd be like,
exactly.
I was being very patient.
I
and
know that's...
Have they decided something?
No,
No.
no.
It'll take
No,
some time.
but this is why this whole week, apparently, from what I have just now heard, and I've seen the 3-page document, that there is, this is why the division has been there. Had I seen the document, if in the old days being in the room, you'd see it instantly.
Yeah.
But because I'm here, we don't have any access or direct access, unfortunately. So we were unable to see that until someone actually sent
Shares.
it. Shares.
I thought that the Article 9 and 10, which meant redefining smoke,
Yeah.
etc., I think that was blocked by the Chinese.
Yes, yes, but this,
Finally, they
that
did
which
something
is which is what we wanted, what you would want them to do, but also because in a multilateral environment, anybody can say and do anything, any country, I mean,
Right.
and St Kitts has seen the opportunity. It's put something in there which is, looks like it's well drafted, and it has all the right things in there. So all the countries are being asked to have a view on that, and apparently, from what I've heard, it's been hotly divided all week. The thing is, what the WHO would usually do and has done in this situation, it would put a lot of pressure on the country making the intervention, in this case St Kitts, to back down, which is why St Kitts is looking right at this moment for other countries such as New Zealand, Philippines, maybe the UK and other
Canada.
countries, Canada, to actually support. And all it is doing is supporting the concept of harm reduction and saying that they need to have more information and an intersessional working group to consider these issues. So you would think most countries would be interested in doing that, unless they're very hardline and don't want India, perhaps.
Yep.
I think the issue will be, is that in the WHO they do tend to work in regions, and India is in CIRO, the Southeast Asian Regional Organisation, and it only has 11 countries in it, and they're all quite hard line. I think you'd probably say Bangladesh is the least hard line, but it's still hard line.
It is, yeah.
So you've got one region there that could stop the consensus if they
want
felt
to,
like it.
And then where would Canada be? Because this makes a different sense to me, because would Canada be with the U.S. and Mexico?
No, Canada's in AMRO, the Americas.
In the
So
Ameri-
it would be with this region,
It's the whole America.
It's all
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
Americas.
Right.
Yeah,
So
so...
you do have some odd things. For example, Israel is in Euro. You have Europe. You have Pakistan is in Eastern Mediterranean, whereas India is in CIRO.
CIRO.
They've divided this. This is historical, but it can give you context of which region is going to go which particular way.
So I'm going to ask you this question because you've been there in those rooms. Is this a good thing that this debate has postponed things this far? Talking about harm reduction, that means that they're talking about it.
Well, it's as I said back in 2007 when I wrote my legal dissertation on bringing the harm reduction and human rights aspects of the FCTC together before there was even vaping products, I said this will become an important future thing. And as we've emerged, there's been people trying to silence that, and it's never really ever come up. But the thing we have to remember is it was put in there in the beginning by the negotiators, right from the year 2000 to the 2003, and it wouldn't have been put there unless they all, 193 governments that negotiated that treaty, actually wanted it to be in there. So this is why often when people say the FCTC is not fit for purpose, I would say to them, it's very fit for purpose, because if you tried to create that document now, you wouldn't be able to do it. What you've got to do is pull out these relevant and important things like that harm reduction is recognised equally as a strategy, and get national governments to take their obligations, but don't throw it away and start again. So to go with what's in the room now, these issues are coming out as they should, and I think the fact that it can be aired and raised, and we will see later on in the day which countries have actually supported things or not, because it's going to have to be decided one way or the other. We'll know that, and I would like to think that it is decided in a way we would like it, and they do get this intersessional working group. And then you want to ensure going forward that the countries that participate in that intersessional working group actually carry in the proper arguments. And I guess that will bring with it the science and evidence that we all know about, and we all want to excel into the debate, and then that can help maybe countries like India learn more from others, but it gives the forum. So I think in this respect, I think it's very good news, and it's great that they're having that debate right now as we speak.
Right.
So
Well, fingers crossed. So another thing which I just wanted to share is that I got a tweet, I think yesterday in the morning, that why is the discussions mostly all over the world looking like it is anti-government? I just want to say right now that I would speak of myself as part of the community where I'm saying we are not anti-government. We're just a counter conference where we are challenging them to see what is the science, the evidence, the data, and presenting it in a different light. Now, when people think about a vaping convention, or they think about people talking about an event just like this, or the other ones which happen in Panama City, it's more basically for the fight for the basic human right to choose a better product. We're not against governments. We're not against bureaucrats. We're not against people in high towers who make policies. We are for the people. That's why it's conference of the people, right? So,
I think people, guys, the government is a thing. But you know what is at the root of many of our governments? Democracy. And this is an example of a democratic process where we are allowed to oppose government without being anti-government. We are allowed in a democratic state. And the WHO, which I keep thinking of a band every time I say the WHO. So the World Health Organization and COP10, they are part of it. They follow democratic principles. Am I right on this? Like, I'm looking at you as the World Health Organization expert.
Some may argue that they're not very democratic
and
in the way they exercise their power, but it is supposed to be a democratic
and I would
sort of
think
institution.
Yeah, any democratic institution would welcome this, or they're hypocrites, just like someone who would welcome harm reduction for certain drugs and not for others. If you don't do it for others, it's hypocritical. And to those that think we're anti-government, we're not. We're pro-democracy, which is it's positive.
But if I just want to put it in a different perspective. Imagine for 5,000 years, human beings have smoked cigarettes, tobacco in all forms, right? 5,000 years. You can go all the way up to Mesopotamia. You can go beyond that. You'll find it even in the cavemen. They smoke tobacco, right? After 5,000 years, all of a sudden, you have a device. You have an opportunity to have something which is less harmful. Ask every family member who has suffered from lung cancer, every patient's family who has lost an individual to oral cancer, and a very open-ended question: if there was a safer alternative, would you choose that or not? The answer would always be in the affirmative, because only those people who have been affected really know how bad it affects them. And the science, I keep saying this again and again, it's the science, it's the science, it's the science. Go back to the science, because that is what we base everything on. Our drugs, our pharmaceuticals, our clothes, everything is based on research. The research speaks for itself. There's a phrase in Latin, res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. You have the data, right? That's exactly what it is. We have all the data available that shows that even if you just look at the smoke, I was talking to Dr. Ricardo, the composition of the smoke is different. Roberto, my boy, oh my God.
You've done it now.
I pulled up, yeah, sorry. So I was speaking to Dr. Roberto, and we were discussing about the difference in the smoke, what's the pyrolysis, and all of that thing. There's a huge difference in smoke, which is generated from a cigarette combustion, And the vapor, I'm using a very different word. There's a smoke and there's a vapor which is generated from an ENDS, or an electronic nicotine delivery system. Both of them are completely different. One is aerosolized, the other is a combustion byproduct. This one has got 7,000 to 8,000 chemicals in it, most of which can cause cancer, it can cause endothelial damage, it can cause problems in your arteries, your lungs, your brain, in every possible organ. This one has got hardly a few chemicals, and the data is also suggestive that it is definitely 95% safer than tobacco smoke. So what is the debate? So the debate then boils down to, what is the policy? And that is what needs to be defined.
Yeah, but then that's the way it should be.
Yes, exactly.
But why it is not like that? Because you have the problem of self-preserving bureaucracies. You have a bureaucracy that has been taking care of smoking, and this is a bureaucracy that started with very good reputation. They faced the tobacco industry, there was tobacco wars, etc. And for 20 years, they have been, 20 or more years, they have been handling the tobacco issue, the smoking issue. They have their own methods, they have built careers, they have built interests, they connected with the pharmaceutics, because what is in the end the role of the WHO? To coordinate a massive global political framework to coordinate a lot of activities. So it's a very powerful bureaucracy. And up to 2011, even though electronic cigarettes were invented in 2003, but they really got into the market at around 212, right? And oral tobacco, snus, etc., existed before, right? So it's not, the vaping is not the only harm reduction product, but it's the only one that has become sufficiently popular to pose a challenge, right? So this bureaucracy is forced to understand what you just said. It should. Because it's a fact. It's a fact. It's an experimental fact. It is 2 plus 2 equals 4. No more argument. Right. So, but they have to recognize that. And what happens if they do? Let's imagine. What would happen if suddenly the WHO, the FTCT, and the Secretariat would suddenly recognize, yeah, this is the solution. That means for us, because we're small people, I'm just a humble scientist, you are a doctor.
A humble doctor, yeah.
Well, yeah, I would say, by all means. But we are not a massive bureaucracy. A massive bureaucracy, to modify them, it is a huge problem.
Right.
They have to change their paradigm, their business model. A lot of people would lose jobs. The whole planning would have to be completely, and of course we would like that to happen, but bureaucracies are not acting like that. Governments do not change like that, right? So this is what we are facing. You are absolutely right, but we have to think why it's not happening.
See, I have the NRTs, which came in as the harm reduction, right? The nicotine replacement therapies. Mm-hmm. You have the patches, you have the chewing gums, and then you have so many other aids. They miserably failed.
But they are within the system.
Yeah, they're within the system. So what happens is, here you have the patches. See, these are good products. It works for people who can use them, right? Mm-hmm. But there is a very, very high failure rate. The failure rate is 97%. 97% of people do not want to have chewing gums. They don't want to have patches stuck on their body. See, because as a human being, you have something which is called the organoleptic property. You want to feel it, you want to touch it. It's something which we as human beings do. We are tactile beings, right? Now, you have the chewing gums, you have the patches, and then there's a huge gap between them and the cigarettes. The electronic nicotine delivery systems, the tobacco like snus and all the other products, they have to fill that gap in between to allow people to make a choice between this and this, so at least it meets them somewhere mid-ground. Right now, there's nothing. So they go back to smoking, they go back to harm increased activities. So where's the gap? And there is a product in the gap, but we want to be ostriches with your head in the ground and say, no, no, everything's fine.
You know where's
No,
the gap? You know where's the gap? That it's a consumer product.
And the pharmaceutical
Oh, yeah.
industry
Oh, yeah.
makes
Oh,
the
yeah.
NRTs.
Also, I just want to get Lindsay into the conversation. She's down there like,
Well, I mean, to piggyback off what Roberta was saying, the WHO is it's an organization of unelected, unaccountable of people, of bureaucrats, I mean, that are kind of controlling the world. And I know they mean well, but unfortunately, when it comes no, I'm not going to throw them completely under the bus, even though I know my boss loathes them, and especially how much money the United States gets to them. Even though, like, their tobacco policy is just ridiculous. The fact that, you will not let the people who are part of the problem become part of the solution is beyond me. And don't you think that they would know a little bit more about how to make products safer? They're the ones making the products that are so harmful. Assuming that they can only do harmful products. I would just keep thinking of it. It'd be like telling a car manufacturer that the only products that they can do is using a diesel engine. Then nope, you can't make an electric vehicle. You're banned from making an electric vehicle, but you can keep selling these products that we know are causing harm. It's just unbelievable to me. But and then the misinformation on that. And while the United States itself is not a party of the FCTC, if you read our Tobacco Control Act, which came out in 2009, there's a lot of similarities between that treaty and ours. And I think like one of our biggest problems is that FDA is not allowed to approve any tobacco product because for some reason that would, tell people that this might be safe or something, and there is no safe tobacco product. And so what I always see is our opponent organizations are always like, the FDA doesn't approve these. And again, massive miscommunication to these people who could actually use the information about these products to help them quit smoking. Like you said, NRTs. Terrible success rate and most of the people you'll find that are using e-cigarettes and have used them to quit smoking have already tried NRTs and they failed, okay? And so having their government come at them and say, here, keep using this. Oh, not recognizing that you quit smoking using this other product. Oh, no, you can only use this one and subsidizing it is just beyond me. And as a taxpayer, it frustrates me extremely much so. Again, it comes down to all the information and also what is their invested interest. I mean, you have to begin to wonder if they want to perpetuate the smoking problem because it is, I think, these technologies and how much they've been able to, evolve and adapt and, the different types of tobacco harm reduction products. It's not just vaping, it's nicotine pouches, it's heated tobacco. I'm sure there's going to find other ways that consumers can consume nicotine in a less harmful way. And they have been more successful, and they can get to everybody in a better way than NRTs and gums and patches could ever do. So,
thank you. I tried a pouch for the first time. Thank you. I think you gave it to me. Thank you. I'm pointing. I tried one and I used it, and it was for the first time. I didn't have a craving for an e-cigarette. I didn't have a craving for anything. It really soothed my nicotine consumption. My nicotine quest, for lack of a better word, I want it. But the flavor was nice. And this is where I think flavors are our superpowers as an industry in novel tobacco products. I'll quote the WHO here, novel tobacco products. But it's also something that is weaponized against us. How do we, because I think we need to keep flavors in these. And I think the choice and the variety is so important. How do we do that? Like, how do you
flavor
counter
are you
that?
vaping right now?
Oh, I have banana ice and strawberry lemonade.
One of the reasons.
And the pouch was tropical ice and a tropical something. It was really good.
One of the reasons why flavors work very well with nicotine products is if you understand the time to action, right? There are different NRTs. There's smoking, and there's vaping. There's all the other products which come in between. From the time you take a drag, right, or you just take a deep inhalation, it goes into the lungs, and then from there it crosses into the blood through the alveoli. It takes 20 seconds to reach your brain. Just 20 seconds, that activates your dopamine. The end result of every good feeling in this planet is dopamine, right? Whether you fall in love, or whether you have cigarettes, or whether you have that lovely burger you always wanted, right? It's all about the dopamine. That drives our quest to like some product and continue using it. That is where marketers come in and they objectivize it. Right? When you attach nicotine to a flavor, it just makes that pleasure, that experience pleasurable, because then you're sending another impulse to the hypothalamus or the hippocampal gyrus in the brain, which connects an emotion to the action, right? You have an emotion with an action. If someone gives you a slap, that's a negative emotion, and it's connected with that. But you have a pleasure, and you have a dopamine effect. So it helps people actually relieve and reduce the amount of nicotine over a period. There's no other solution in the market today where you can reduce nicotine over a period of time. I have had patients of mine who have started them on, I had a patient of mine which was one of the best success stories, and he was willing to testify. He used to smoke 12 packets of cigarettes a day.
Where did he have time?
That's what I asked him. It's 24 hours. How do you smoke 12 packets? He was a chain smoker. He was a very big businessman. I'm saying was because we lost him very recently. He was a very big, he had his own airline and all that stuff. And he was to smoke 10 packets of cigarettes a day. I switched him on to a vaping device. He started with 18 milligrams of nicotine in, the 18 milligram liquid, right? That was the strongest I could get in Freebase for him. 18 milligrams over a period of 18 months. We reduced it down to 2 milligrams. Then he switched to 0 nicotine for a month and then went back to 2. That was something which was really amazing, because I don't think I could overcome somebody's withdrawal effect any other way. I can't. Even if you look at opium poisoning, people who use opium, they use LSD, they use methadone. We have to substitute something with something, because the brain doesn't give you a deal. The brain requires that interaction. So what we do is we give you naltrexone to combat the morphine, right?
But see, you're describing what it works.
Yeah.
You're describing 2 plus 2 in a concrete experimental way. There are many descriptions of this type. There are even scientific studies showing that. But what is the consequence for a global technocracy on that? See, the global technocracy, when we say tobacco control, we have to say tobacco. Control! See? Control is the issue, right?
So awesome.
And
I'm sorry, I had coffee in my mouth.
when we are, yeah, when I hear you, I can hear a reality, right? It's a reality, but it's a reality that is difficult to control at the bureaucratic level, right? If you are
I think that's why the bureaucrats are going for flavours and to an extent
Yes,
yes,
because
true.
Yes,
absolutely.
That's
Look,
why they're so important to
It is very
protect.
logical. It fits the pattern. For example, when they say the FDA or bureaucratic instances, they only approve tobacco vaporizers, vapes, that look like cigarettes. They are cylinders, and they are closed. You cannot tamper with them, and they emit an emission that looks like tobacco. And this is what is acceptable for people who are willing to regulate, because it is controllable, because the framework for tobacco control, it is controlling it. They feel they are controlling it because they enact regulation, they coordinate world politics in order to agree to certain policies and so on. And even though we know it's a complete failure, but they feel that they are controlling it. Now, if you allow for a consumer product to do the work, that's something they cannot control. They cannot control it, because who will control different type of devices, different nicotine, that it will be accessible to different public? For a bureaucrat, a technocrat, this is nightmare, right? And this is what happens, right? This is the problem.
Thank you. That little episode from Dr. Sussman, I guess we'll make the announcement now. It's called Scientists After Dark.
Control.
Scientists After Dark airs at midnight, and you get a sneak peek into the scientists at Good Cop, Bad Cop. They know how to party. Okay. How about we play a game? So I'm a Toastmaster, and one of the coolest, funnest parts of Toastmasters is table topics. So you have between 1 minute and 30 and 2 minutes to say something. So I want each of you, and we'll start with Lindsay at the end. You've got 2 minutes to give your spiel to the delegates at COP why they need to support harm reduction.
Well, Dr. King, it's really unfortunate you couldn't join us today. I know that you need 6 months in advance, and I would have really enjoyed talking to you about the PMTA process, especially for smaller businesses. And I guess the message to the world: the kids are okay. It's not nicotine that's a big problem. There's a lot of things wrong with the kids, but start listening to the consumers. I know in America, 20 million adults who are using these products, mostly flavors. If you're looking at what people are buying, it's unfortunate your hatred for tobacco companies and the industry has got you completely blinded to the science, to the facts, and the people of this. So again, the Conference of the People was what we're hosting. But you're still more than welcome to come down, Dr. King. We're here till 4. So, and yeah, we'll keep moving on for tobacco harm reduction access.
Next up.
That's me, right? So I'm going to speak to the delegates who are representing all the countries over there, especially to the countries where I belong to and the countries where I reside in. You carry our responsibility. They carry a very, very big responsibility. And if people die from using harmful products, that responsibility also is something that you have to carry. That burden is also something that you have to carry. You have to also think and imagine that there are your own family members, just like we have family members who are going to keep making harmful choices. And risk reduction, harm reduction also belongs to you as much as it belongs to us. So even though there are policies, even though there are some prohibitory policies, it is very important to keep an open mind, because not only are you taking a decision for the country, but also for your own family and for the families of all the people. And it's going to be, you can use it as a thing of honor for the people who've died using these products. So that's something which I would like to share with all the delegates.
Okay, I would say to the delegates, hello COP10 delegates, I know that right this moment you are discussing in a very heated debate under item 6.3 as to whether tobacco harm reduction should be part of an intersessional working group going forward. I would ask you to think very carefully about what you're doing and look to countries that actually have real science and evidence where things can show the benefits of least harmful products. First of all, I would say consider Sweden. It's the only country in the world that is legally deemed a non-smoking country. And why is that? Because they have had a product called snus for about 300 years. It was involved very strongly in the politics of the 1968 revolt in Paris, and it was also the reason why the Swedish government would not join the European Union at the time that was set up, in order to, unless they were allowed to keep their snus, which they wanted, and they were given a derogation in the treaty to set up the European Union. All of that has shown many, many years on, evidence, epidemiology of which the Swedes have done for more than 50 years show that it is the least harmful product, tobacco product in fact, not just nicotine product, that exists, and the lowest level of deaths and disease from any tobacco product, not just in Europe, but anywhere in the world. There is the science and evidence. We can then extrapolate, delegates, to the fact that nicotine pouches are thought to be even safer than snus, although that there's years of research to still be done on that, but evidence would indicate that's the direction. We have vaping products that are very, very successful with smokers to quit, more successful than any NRT product in the past. And we have heated tobacco products which are very, very successful in Japan. They have switched a significant amount of the smoking population to a less harmful, non-combustible alternative in a place where vaping is banned. So it shows that that can work as well very effectively. These are the sorts of things that you should be looking about and looking at those various products. So India, you should be looking to what's happened in Sweden, and the UK, you should be looking to the science and evidence instead of knee-jerk reactions to media in a current political dynamic that is so focused on the next election rather than science and evidence, and is really throwing the consumers of the UK under the bus by not standing up to this in a stronger way, which is most unfortunate. So that's what I'd say.
Thank you, Jeannie. Roberto?
Yeah. To the delegates, we have to realize three things that are important. First, there is a reality in the street, and there is a reality at the top technocratic meetings. It is unavoidable because no technocracy is able to control everything or to regulate everything. So this is unavoidable, but it is important that you as representative of countries do not ignore the reality in your own countries. It is important. Maybe you don't like this reality, maybe you want to change it, but the first step is to recognize it, not to hide yourself in discourse, or in politics, or whatever. You have to recognize it. Then the second is that you have to recognize also scientific evidence. Very basic scientific evidence is that these novel, these non-combustible products, and this a wide variety of them, from pouches, snus, electronic cigarettes, heated tobacco products, they are really much safer than cigarettes. Don't fool yourself. Don't turn around this. Don't bring up some study made on cells or on mice, because what happens with cells or mice is not what happens in the human body. And there is evidence, here I can speak of my own work, that these products are really safe. Don't turn around that. Just face it. Maybe you don't like this, but you are entitled to opinions, but not to facts. So this is the second thing. And the third thing, consider that a paradigm of controlling tobacco that was started in the 1990s cannot be eternal. You cannot keep the same discourse, the same narrative, the same policies. You cannot keep them forever, and you cannot exclude other actors in criticizing. Even the industry has to be involved. Everybody. You take the example of climate change. Climate change is a global problem, but you don't have this purity criterion that no industry will get there. You have to change the paradigm in which you address tobacco. It cannot last forever. The reality in 2024 is very different from what happened in the 1990s when the FTCT was created. It's a huge achievement. It's the first treaty, global treaty, that involves public health. So, but that it does not have to be eliminated. No, it has to be transformed. It has to change. Everything changes, and this is not an exception. And finally, I would like to refer to private contributors like the Bloomberg Foundation and the Gates Foundation. It's okay that they are part of the team, but they have to be more transparent, more accountable, and they should not have veto power. They should not have veto power through lobbying, and this also has to be regulated. Welcome, Mr. Gates, Mr. Bloomberg, come on. The more people are involved in this global quest for public health, the best. But don't try to control the vote. Don't try to use your enormous wealth and political power and lobbying to put things on your own perspective. So this would be the 4 items that I would like people to recommend. Science, recognizing reality, evolution, and accountability for everybody, including the private, the private sectors that are contributing. These 4 items I would recommend.
Thank you. And eventually we'll have Elon Musk and Kanye West on our side
Welcome.
for harm
Yeah,
reduction.
we welcome them. But
We're going to get the cool
they-
billionaires.
But they cannot run the boat.
No, they would never run the boat.
They just buy it.
They just buy it.
Maybe they'll just make a Tesla cigarette.
I want to end with one thing. Right now, we know what's going on there. One of the things that frustrates me the most is regulations and policies that are created around the world based on, I don't want to say a lie, even though it feels like a lie is the best word, but lack of information, lack of science. As people in that field, well, in law, in science, how do you feel when you see regulations happening? Well, I mean, in Mexico, they're putting it in the Constitution that vaping, you can't vape. You're looking at other countries that are saying that it's worse than fentanyl. How do you feel about that? And what can people in those countries, like what advice would you give to those countries? I know that's a big thing, but this is what's happening is there are countries that are regulating vaping products based on one-sided misinformation, that are choosing to close the door on others' information.
Fighting the misinformation. I mean, just keep trudging on. I always tell people, especially when they're contacting their policymakers, to think about it as Shawshank Redemption and Andy Dufresne when he was writing letters to get the prison library, and after 2 years he finally got a response, and then he's like, well, I'm going to write 2 letters a day now, or 2 letters a week. It's persistence. There's always going to be misinformation, and there's going to be hope. I mean, there is some hope. I remember earlier last year there was like a big thing about fentanyl vapes, and they haven't talked about that lately. So and just it's consistent, persistent, and keep going, keep trudging on, and keep making sure, especially consumers, you have to be engaging with your policymakers, because I can tell you from personal experience, most of them are completely, they don't know, okay? They don't use these products. That a lot of, I know at least in the States, a lot of policymakers have other, like at the state level, have other jobs. They don't have time to do all the research on this. You have to be the voice for that.
Thank you. Rohan?
Sorry, there's somebody just crawling
I know,
around
I
behind.
thought it was a puppy.
I
I
got
thought it was
scared.
a puppy.
I thought it was a dog or something. So, like Lindsay just said, misinformation, disinformation, I will also say no information, right? It's just, they just woke up from the sleep and said, okay, this is what it is. As it has been from the time when Copernicus said that the Earth is not the center of the universe, right? That was when they believed the Earth was the center of the universe, and they were prosecuted for it. And then the information came, and then we realized the Earth revolves around the sun and not the vice versa. So misinformation is always challenged by hardcore research. But what do you do if research is banned? Then you have a bigger issue. So now you ban research because you don't want somebody to come out with the truth. So in countries where this kind of a policy is there, I urge the people in the other countries to start providing data, because then you can say, look, they have the same data, we have the same body, so obviously it works for us as well, right? Because when a new drug is introduced into a market, which is naive to that drug, the regulators for the drug always take data from all the other countries, and they assume, and it's called, they take the pooled analysis, and they say, okay, based on these countries' data, this drug appears to be safe, let's have a clinical trial. They have a clinical trial, find out their own data, and they go ahead with the approval for that drug. Why not do the same? It's very simple. There are so many countries like the UK, you have the US, you have research going on all over the world. You can't just go into a journal and just say, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this, because these two articles are in my favor. And that's exactly what happened when they banned the electronic nicotine systems. They took particular research which was in their favor and utilized it to say, okay, this is harmful, this is this, and used youth vaping as a major excuse and say, because the youth will start vaping of something which has never happened, or it's just speculation, right? But it does happen, but not to the extent that they claim it to be. Use research which is already there, apply it to your population, see how it works, get your own data, and then it's very convincing.
Thank you. Jeannie?
Yeah, I would say what Lindsay said in a way in terms of consistency and persistence in pushing an argument. And I would say that to the consumers in terms of what consumers are doing, those enlightened medical and scientific people for what they're doing. And if we just look at today, I mean, I started writing in 2007 about Article 1D of the FCTC, and I wrote it in my legal dissertation as being something bringing together the human rights and the access to harm reduction in the FCTC. And I used to talk about it all the time until people would say, don't invite that woman to the conference because all she's going to talk about is Article 1D of the FCTC. And so I started writing articles about it, which eventually in 2012 and 2015, that's probably when I got the last one published, because no one would, that woman's writing about that bloody harm reduction again in the FCTC. And it was kind of like, and it just became like you and eventually, so I sort of feel today, yeah, I have pushed a lot of that over many years, and I'm really glad and excited to see that it's actually in the room now, or we have to hope that it does go the right way. But I think as a movement, as people from whatever you're from, the legal side, the policy side, the science side, the medical side, the consumer side, the families of people who've had issues side, I think we just have to keep going, because truth, hopefully, in most things does prevail, despite the Goliath of opposition to this issue succeeding.
Thank you. And Dr. Sussman?
Yeah, misinformation is ignoring reality. And of course, you cannot control that. Some tabloids do it, politicians. In my country, where we have a very undemocratic government, very centralized in one person, so it happens. It is part of the world. We cannot avoid it, but it is the responsibility of those who are running the responsibility of the participants in this conference of the parties not to be swayed by this tendency, to look at the reality. For example, a piece of reality that has to be recognized is what is happening in countries like New Zealand, Sweden, Norway. Well,
That's your 10-second notification.
this reality has to be recognized, and it is your responsibility to raise on top of tabloids, petty politicians, petty interests, and look at this reality and have this reality as reference. It's also the reality of the scientific evidence that these products are safer. Don't lose these two markers. These two markers are essential. You have to keep them on, right? This is my...
Thank you. And I want to thank all the guests today, and I want to thank everybody that's watching. We are now going to go on a 1-hour break, and at 1 o'clock, we are going to be talking about what policies should countries take to reduce smoking rates. You are not going to miss it. Tweet it. Let everybody know to come check us out on our YouTube channel. And again, thank you, and have a good one. And oh my goodness, this is almost over. Bye.
Don't cry, Maria.
I cry over everything.
Don't cry.